Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast. This podcast is for and about first-time pilgrims walking the pilgrimage routes in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Here we are, early in December 2025, into the final approach to the new year. This is my favorite time of year when we celebrate and prepare for what I call the giant reset button. Hi, this is Nancy, back after taking a week off from producing the podcast for the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday, bringing you today another pilgrim conversation. This time we're hearing from Richard, who you met back in episode 127. Richard's story really stood out because he is living with a significant vision impairment. But it didn't stop him from walking the Camino Francés from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Santiago and then onto the coast to Fisterra and Muxía. And his story didn't stop there. Here's the question Richard answers for us. What do you do when you realize that what you had planned wasn't going to be enough? Now, I have to tell you, I had some trouble editing this episode just due to some sound problems. There are some background sounds that I couldn't edit out, and the overall sound quality is just not as high as I like. So please bear with me. The story is worth it. And last thing, before we meet up with Richard again, I want to let you know that I will be making a change for the remainder of 2025 and through at least January 2026. I've done my best to bring you a new episode every week, and I think I hit that goal all but 3 or 4 weeks this year. But as I wrap up the year and lay plans for next year, I'm going to switch up the release schedule. So for now, I will be releasing an episode every 2 weeks instead of every week. I'll let you know if and when I'm able to go back to the weekly schedule. 2 weeks from today's release date is Tuesday, December 23rd, so that's when you'll get the next episode. So let me now wish you a merry and happy holiday season, filled with lots of love and peace as you celebrate with family and friends. All right, now let's hear from Richard. Richard, hi. Thank you for joining me on the podcast again. Welcome.
Hey, Nancy. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, thank you. I was so happy when I got your email because you've been on my mind. I watched, I think I got a couple emails from you when you were either on the trail or at the end. And it was, I just kept thinking, I need to know more. I need to know how this is going. Your first interview was so inspiring. So let's hear the story. How about we start with putting the pin in the map? Will you remind us what you did, what your Camino was?
Yeah, certainly. So I started walking on July 22nd in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port after flying into Biarritz and then taking a shuttle from there. So I started on, July 23rd and followed the Camino Francés. I took a little less than 1 month. I think it took about 28 days, to arrive in Santiago de Compostela.
Okay. So how was it? How's that for a broad, that can go anywhere question?
Oh my goodness. I tried not to have too many expectations prior to embarking on the journey, but I did have some ideas, and nothing really compared to the actual experience of walking it. And so in that, I think it lived up to my expectations.
Lived up to or exceeded your expectations, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I want to dive into that a little bit, but first I want to just backtrack a bit. People listening may remember that you went into this with impaired vision. Would you remind us what your situation is around your vision and what you were wondering about or anticipating as you got ready for the Camino relative to that?
Yeah, certainly. So it's been about 2.5 years that I've had vision impairment. It affects my central vision, meaning that I can only use my periphery. And while my periphery is a little bit damaged, I am able to see clearly, and over these last 2.5 years, I progressed from needing a lot of assistance and a lot of activities almost with everything, to first going for walks, getting outdoors, and then to a little bit more difficult hiking and just navigating public spaces. And then, yeah, within this last year or so, I've been able to get back to hiking. And so there was this trajectory of learning how to use the vision I have, being that peripheral vision. It still prevents me from, say, reading documents. I can't see facial expressions hardly at all, unless I'm very close to a person. But for the most part, yeah, the use of my peripheral vision is more than enough to manage myself safely, and it was enough to go on a journey like this one. So, yeah, I'd say I'm getting along pretty well at this
It's
point.
amazing. Yeah, it's of course it's something that people without this impairment take completely for granted. I did think of you when I was on the Camino in September, reflecting back on what it must have been like for you and how, gosh, that's a really big plot twist to have to contend with loss of vision
Yeah,
as an adult.
yeah, it's it's been challenging.
Understatement. Thank you very much.
The only difficulty is that, yeah, it seems like I don't know, at first it was almost every day I'd find some frustrating situation, and then it was maybe once a week there'd be something that would just kind of stump me. Um, and more recently, I've become used to this new norm. So, yeah, and I think just going on a journey such as this one, it was empowering. It let me know. It kind of pushed my boundaries in a way, let me kind of explore what I could and couldn't do. But I think what I'd learned over these last couple of years is, I think I mentioned in our first interview, is how to ask for help and how to use the resources that at my fingertips via assistive technology and other resources to help me navigate the world, yeah, with this impairment.
All right. So, what is the story of your Camino that you want to tell?
Story of my Camino. Um, well, I felt like there were sort of segments. On the Camino Francés, I felt like there was this first section where it was really my body getting used to walking so much every day. It was my mind getting used to that sort of meditative experience of walking so much every day. And then there was the social component, just becoming accustomed to meeting people from all over the place, all of whom are, stepping out away from their routines, their patterns, and so everyone's sort of thrown into this mix that creates this really unique environment. So I'd say prior to the Meseta, so prior to Burgos, it was this sort of settling in kind of experience. And then I found myself really having connected with a few really great friends, and being more comfortable physically and mentally. I felt like I was in a blissful state just walking through the Meseta for those days, which I didn't hear from many other people. But
in in uh, in August, right? Walking through the Meseta in August,
yeah, early August.
a little on the warm side, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah, I took advantage of the early mornings when it was cool out, as did many others. But yes, it was pretty warm. But then there was the last phase. So I guess I'm identifying three different phases, and so between yeah, I'd say around I guess León, or let's see, Hospital de Órbigo, I really became close to the people, close to, I'd say, more to the experience. I felt like I was able to really just settle in, and I felt like I wasn't rushing my days. I felt like I was comfortable physically and in the space I was in to just let whatever happened happened. And so there was a fluidity about the last, I'd say, third of the Camino Francés that was distinct from, yeah, the first and second thirds. And so my experience, yeah, it was this sort of progression that happened over the span of that month. And yeah, I've found in many ways it continued onward.
How about challenges?
Challenges. So the vision impairment presented its challenges, but it was most often speaking with people from all over the world with English often as the second language. There was so much like mannerisms, facial expressions that were used to communicate. And so at the beginning in particular, I was having a difficult time being more attuned to hearing and hearing people's tone of voice and reading people's facial expressions. It was very difficult at times to, or at the beginning, to really make connections with other
Mm.
people. And I actually would say that was partially a projection of my own sort of self-imposed isolation in a way. I feel somewhat separate because my experience is different. And so I felt like there was this disconnect between me and others. But communication at the start presented some challenges. And fortunately, I was comfortable physically, although my feet did take some settling in. So there was that couple weeks of my body really getting used to things. I'd say so. I practiced a lot of meditation in my life, and yet nothing really had prepared me for doing something. I think any activity, doing anything for so long, for so many hours, day after day, and ridding oneself of all the usual diversions that I have in my life at home
Yeah.
meant that I was very much in that moment. And I think that it, especially in that first third again, I think coming to accept that, okay, this wasn't just a few days, this wasn't a week. I would be walking for a long period of time, and this would be the reality. I think it was very much a challenge to accept that that was the state of things.
Interesting. Yeah. And so by the time you hit the meseta, do you feel like you had that sort of layered out?
Yeah, I would say so. I remember I was watching a sunrise just, let's see, it must have been the morning right after Burgos, and there was one really steep, there was a really steep hill, and I remember I'd gotten there, and maybe it was after Ontanas. Anyway, there was a sunrise in one of those first couple days of the Meseta, and I remember just having this sort of blissed out, just kind of sense of freedom, just being at ease with where I was and
Ah,
what I was doing.
lovely. Lovely. And when we talked the first time, you asked me some questions that I don't think I didn't have ready answers for. You had asked me about ways that people with impaired vision might be able to better navigate a world like the Camino and looking for um, what are some of the markers or the signs or the ways that things are identified in Spain. How did you do with all of that?
I remember asking the question, and I believe you responded actually with one piece of advice that I found to be very useful was the sandwich boards outside of the bars or cafes. And I hadn't considered that prior to going, and that was
Okay.
typically how I would first identify places to eat. There were a number of others. Finding water fountains, that was important right from the start, and they were very rarely noted anywhere. There wouldn't be a sign, or there wouldn't really be much to denote that, here was a fountain. And so I came to recognize that oftentimes they were built into it'd be sort of a rectangular wall, and though oftentimes it was the same color as what was behind it, oftentimes it would be placed apart from other things, often near benches in a plaza most frequently. And so I began to identify sort of those structures that were these backgrounds for the fountains, and which led me to note. So at the beginning and ending of most of the communities, there would be a triangular shape where the roads would diverge, and it would create a plaza for many of these communities, especially smaller ones. And so I began to, with my low vision, I would notice as soon as the roads diverged and there'd be a couple of benches, oftentimes I would be able to find that structure at the far end of the space. And um, let's see.
That's actually a great observation in terms of the layout, the city planning, if you will, of how these towns and villages are laid out. And that's a cue that sighted people can use as well, because the layout of these towns and villages is fairly consistent. They have the same elements, right? They have a plaza. Many of them have a play park. Then they have benches, and then they have water, and then they have bars. Yeah, so there's some very predictable things about Spanish towns and villages.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The format, I found myself, yeah, more easily. sort of developing the sense of where things would be located after.
Okay.
That also applied to where the signs were. They weren't always on the sort of totems. They were also painted on rocks. They would be a little bit discreet at times, which was challenging for me. I'd say it was by the third or fourth day, probably after Pamplona, where I felt like I began to know where to look when I wasn't in a space that would have the typical signs that I would see along the way.
Okay.
There was a funny realization about a week in. I think I was near Puente la Reina when I began to keep an eye out for horizontal, brightly colored. It wouldn't be a sign, it would just be bright colors that were horizontal and lifted off the ground. And they would always be gas stations, which would be this resource for coffee or for water, for frutos secos, being nuts. And
Gas stations are a hidden gem because they almost all of them have what we would, like our gas stations have. In the US, they have the shop with everything you need, but so often there's even a bar with an espresso machine, so you can get your cafe con leche as well. Yeah, good. So the two colors, horizontal, what was that? Was that the top of the covering over the pumps?
exactly, yeah. But that would be what I could see at a distance, and oftentimes I could see that further away than just about any other kind of structure. So,
Okay, there it is. That is so helpful.
yeah. And then I began to recognize the signs outside of all the different types of accommodation. There were the blue signs, being for A for albergue, there were the Casa Rural. There were a few other types of buildings that would have that, oftentimes blue or green signs. And then there were the other ones like the tobacco shop.
Hmm.
I don't consume tobacco products, but I discovered that many of them have different types of food and drink. And so noting those and being able to identify those by the sort of brown colored tea.
Sure.
And then there were a couple other small observations, like glass windows, especially in smaller towns, were very rare. And if glass windows were there, that often meant there was either a cafe or there was a bank. And so I would know to keep an eye out for those if I was in need of either, yeah, food or drink or to withdraw money.
I'm loving seeing this through your eyes and, your eyes that are seeing things so differently than some of us do. It's so interesting.
It was quite an experience, and sometimes people would ask me how I would be doing what I was doing, and I wouldn't really have an answer. Just put one foot in front of the next, and these being people with whom I'd shared about my low vision.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think I learned some tips and tricks along the way.
definitely. Definitely. And again, it's things that fully sighted people completely take for granted. Yeah. What was it like for you reaching Santiago?
Powerful. I was there with a really great group, Luca and Jordan and Julia and Joss, and there were a handful of us that had gotten very close by this time. And yeah, it's I'm having a hard time finding words to describe it. I was in sort of a um, I wouldn't call it a state of shock. I just didn't have many words. I just kind of took it all in, and I probably looked kind of dazed. It was powerful. I think after having spent nearly a month, maybe wondering if this day and this moment would come, and then the months prior, wondering if, this whole journey would happen. And then, I think I mentioned to you in our first interview, I'd wanted to do this for 15 plus years. And
Yeah.
so there was all this sort of maybe unacknowledged anticipation, like, will this moment actually arrive? And
Yeah.
so taking it all in, yeah, and especially after I didn't expect to be able to do this sort of adventure just a couple of years ago. It was a lot, and I think in some ways it's a couple months later, and I think I'm still processing it.
Sure.
Still have moments where I can kind of look at it objectively and recognize this was quite an accomplishment.
This is a tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah,
I have often thought that when I walk into Santiago, there should be a parade in my honor for what I've just accomplished. And I think that's doubly so for you. Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment. Yeah. So when you got to Santiago, did you have a sense of done? I did it, done. Or did you need to walk some more?
Well, I might have walked a little more. So it
Okay.
must have been right around the Meseta. I told you that I'd settled in and was
Yeah.
feeling like I was thriving. I began to look at this sort of this leeway I had at the end of my scheduled dates for the trip, and I realized that I would want to keep on walking. And so I changed my flight around a little bit and I was able to extend my journey somewhat. And so I continued on to Muxía and then Finisterra. Met some wonderful friends along the way to those destinations. And then I decided to take a bus down to Lisbon and walk the Camino Portugues.
Okay. Another entire route.
So I wasn't ready to be done yet,
Okay.
and I had the freedom to keep on going, and I just had such an incredible time on the Camino Francés. And yeah, I think about day 2 or 3 of the Camino Portugués, I was questioning all my life's decisions and wondering what I was doing.
As one does.
I think questioning one's life decisions can be healthy to a degree.
I think so. I think so. Okay, so hold on. We need to put another pin in the map. So you walk from Lisbon back to Santiago?
I did. Yeah,
Okay. How long did that one take?
let's see, it would have been about 3.5 weeks, I believe. So I think, yeah, about a little over 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks.
Okay. Okay. What was that experience like?
It's interesting. Having done both the Camino Francés and Portuguese back to back, it felt like a sort of continuation.
Ah,
I'd gone through that experience of having arrived in Santiago and felt that sense of accomplishment, but I'd already settled so much into the routine and just kind of this I guess this pattern of get up and throw on the pack and start walking. I'd become so acclimated to the experience that it just felt natural. And I was not surprised at all that a huge part of the Camino Portugues was exactly the same as the Francés, and that the people I met were what made the experience so just incredible and what it was. So yeah, I met a handful of others, Janine and Jasmina, Habibi. There was a group of 4 of us, and we traveled much of the way together. And I got to spend my birthday on the Camino with them in Porto. And
lovely.
yeah, in some ways, I guess the landscapes are different, but the experience itself, I wouldn't really distinguish from the Francais. It was made by the people I met along the way and just the way I received the experience. And so, yeah, I'm grateful I had that opportunity as well.
That's just amazing. Now, the Portuguese route, once you reach Porto, you have a couple of route options. What did you walk on the Portuguese? What route option did you choose?
Yeah, so I chose to walk the Costa Oficial, which is the coastal route that just goes a little bit inland. It goes out to the Costa Litoral at some points. So I followed the coastline, especially after the Camino Francés and then much of the Portuguese not being near water. It felt very nice to be near the ocean for a while.
Sure.
So I followed, yeah, the coastline on the Oficial for, I guess, all the way up to the, I'm forgetting the name of the town, but where the border to Spain starts, there's the river that goes inland. It's not Mariña?
Is it the River Mino?
Yeah, but there's a little town right on the end there.
Is it Caminha?
Camino, there we go.
Caminha. Yeah, sweet little town.
Yeah, so I stayed there. Actually, a really great evening with a fellow vision impaired individual, Fabian, and we actually started walking together and found we have exactly the opposite impairment. So he has his central vision, but that's all he has, and we spent some days together, kind of connecting over walking the Camino with our vision differences. But anyway, so I cut in at Caminha and went over to Tui, and yeah, then continued north I didn't go the spiritual route, the
Okay.
spiritual way, which, if in hindsight or in retrospect, I would have gone the spiritual route. I did have a wonderful few days. Again, with those friends that I mentioned, we kind of, although we separated a few times along the trip north, we were able to meet up and walk the last handful of stages together. So I guess about the first two-thirds along the coast, and then inland
Okay.
towards the central, and then central for the last couple of stages.
Okay. If you were to go back and walk again, which of those two routes would you be interested in walking again?
Francés.
How come?
Um, there were, it felt like the longer period of time where there was something about the social element that, well, the Portuguese did offer a similar or uh, much the same experience in that many of my fellow pilgrims were what made the experience what it was. There was something different about um, I guess the social dynamics. It's hard to describe. On the
Mm.
Camino Francés, it felt like more of a collective experience rather than there was a little bit more like individual groups, individuals in general on the Portuguese. And it could have been my experience. I know I ended up with a couple groups that became sort of like Camino families along the way on the Camino Francés. But yeah, like I said, it might have just been my experience, but it did feel like there was almost more of an openness in general for people and kind of creating these bonds for a longer term that lasted all the way through to the end of the Camino.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I'm also thinking about the Portuguese with so many route options where you can take the central out of Porto, the central, the coastal, and then you can hop over to this one and the litoral and the spiritual variant and all of that. You kind of have a better chance of losing people, of people taking off and not reconnecting with them.
That is true. Yeah, I'm sure that was a factor. And for the first, um, well, up until Porto, there isn't much infrastructure either, which made the accommodation a little more challenging, and it made for fewer pilgrims, especially at the start. And so there wasn't such like this energy at the beginning, like at the Camino Francés in Saint Jean and Roncesvalles. There's a whole kind of collective group. Leaving Lisbon, there's this sort of kind of sporadic encountering of other pilgrims, and there isn't this real opportunity, at least for me, to really build that consistent connection from the start. And then later on, yeah, there are the distinct routes. And for me, speaking Spanish, one thing that added to the Camino Francés for me was being able to meet the locals and have these really wonderful, just insightful conversations with people I was meeting who were from Spain.
Wonderful. Yeah, your accent is I can hear it when you say the words Burgos and you're rolling the R's and hitting the vowels have the right sound and all that. Yeah. Are you fluent in Spanish? I don't remember.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've spent about 4 to 5 years in Spanish-speaking countries, including I studied in Spain for a time.
Okay. You may have mentioned that in the last one. I just forgot. That's fantastic. It's one of the things that really adds to the experience is being able to have conversations with the local people.
Yeah, certainly. On that note, so I found myself having completed the Camino Portugués a little faster than expected. I was actually able to spend some time with some friends. There was a Spanish couple I met who lived in Santiago de Compostela, Javi and Elena. I was able to spend some time with them. Then being from Spain, I got to sort of see the sights from a local's eyes. And then I actually went up to Bilbao and saw another Spanish couple I met on the Camino near Burgo Ranero. And then down in Madrid, saw a couple other Spanish friends. And so I had a couple days just kind of getting to reconnect with these friends I'd met along the Camino, all of whom were Spanish. And yeah, I got to see these, I guess, different aspects of Spanish culture in these different regions in very, very different areas, which made just sort of this additional unique experience.
Yeah.
Really grateful.
Fantastic. What was it like for you coming back home?
So I was A bit. I don't know if it was nervous, but there was some concern that I would sort of lose the state of being able to slow down and really embrace each moment that just the nature of walking the Camino allowed. And I found myself pleasantly surprised, and it's still a couple months later, and I feel like I've been able to retain that at least to some degree. It's it's been helped by I keep in touch with many of the friends I made on the Camino and communicate still more daily with many friends. And just this morning, I exchanged some messages with some friends and expect that I'll be seeing many of them again one day, maybe on the Camino. And so that it kind of softened the the culture shock or the culture readjustment coming back. But there are challenges. I think, like with many experiences that are just so unique and outside of the normal realm of experience in one's home environment, it's very hard to explain to others. Kind of like with Peace Corps for me, coming home and
Yeah.
explaining what Peace Corps was like was just very, very challenging.
Yeah.
So being able to, I guess, not just retain, but allow those relationships that I made on the Camino to keep on and have this communication keep going is, yeah, just made settling in a little more easier than I might have expected.
Okay. Well, and I remember from our first conversation, you were very zen going into this. You have that sort of reflective, meditative, quiet presence already. And so I imagine that goes with you wherever you go.
I try. Some days are better than others.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Actually, so I think a lot of what's made coming home easier as well is I've been a little bit more because of the mindfulness practices and meditation work I've done over the last decade and a half. I think I've been a little bit more aware of these old patterns to kind of settle into what I was doing previously, and I've been a little more cognizant to. I just a little more cognizant of how I resumed my life here. That removal from these everyday routines perhaps allowed me to see them a little bit more clearly. And then the mindfulness practices and just being aware of what I'm doing and how I'm doing these things, I think it's gone a long way in helping me to retain that community energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because for many people, they discover mindfulness or being in the present moment on the Camino for the first time, because that happens sort of as a byproduct of all the walking and the rhythm and the bilateral movement. And you get into that sort of hummy place where it's just, yeah, just rhythmic and peaceful. Yeah, you really had a head start on that before you got there. Yeah.
I uh, I found myself learning some things to be sure about mindfulness, and yeah, it it's difficult to put into words.
Well, I was going to ask if there was anything you could share, but that is often the case. It's hard to articulate. But is there anything that you could put into words?
Into words related to the sort of meditative state or the mindfulness
Yeah,
work.
your practices or what you learned by being in that meditative state on the Camino.
Yeah, so I remember being new to meditation and having this experience of what is often called the monkey mind, of one thought leading to another, leading to another, leading to another, and learning how to sit with that and continue with meditation despite that difficulty. That's what sort of helped me progress, is recognizing that those sort of thought patterns are very normal. Now, I still go through that. I still experience it, and being thrown into this new situation and on the Camino started it all anew. For the first couple of weeks, I felt that just constant sort of clinging to a thought, jumping from one branch to the next with that
Yeah.
empty mind. But I found that I was able to observe it a little bit more because of the experience I had. And so I guess recognizing that that is very much just part of this human experience,
Yeah.
I think that can go a long way in coming to terms with letting it go, or maybe allowing a little bit more stillness to come in and just recognizing it's natural when that stillness doesn't happen.
You hit on such an important point. It's just what happens. It's just what the mind does. And it doesn't mean anything, except perhaps it means we're human. Yeah, I appreciate that. So, is there any story that you want to tell or thing that you want to talk about, but you haven't because nobody's asked you the right question yet?
Sure. There was one experience, and it actually happened on the very last day I had of being a pilgrim, which was on day 59 of pilgriming. So I was 27 kilometers away from Santiago de Compostela on the Camino Portugués, and I'm forgetting the name of the town right now. But on the Camino Francés, I'd heard about this pilgrim's lunch when the first 10 pilgrims to receive their Compostela upon arriving in Santiago, they would get invited to have a lunch together in the Parador, or the restaurant in the Parador. And I decided when I walked the Camino Portugués, I was going to try and get that, except I'd landed, so I was 27 kilometers away, and I wanted to get there and needed to get there by about 6 a.m. And so I'd been telling a friend about this, a German woman, Janine, who I'd mentioned previously, and she wanted to join me. And I told her, okay, it looks like we're going to have to wake up at about 1 a.m. and just, you know, get moving if we want to try and get that lunch. And so we had one of the most fun, like early mornings, night hikes, just having the Camino completely to ourselves, as you might imagine. And so, yeah, along the way, we just trade our just stories about our Camino experiences and just enjoyed that early morning so much. And then arrived in Santiago before the sunrise. We got to the pilgrim's office, and we were numbers 9 and 10 of the first 10 pilgrims to receive these invitations to the party. And within minutes, people had arrived after us. So everything was so timed correctly. We had just such a beautiful experience just all throughout this morning to receive this lunch. And yeah, had a great time at that lunch. We were a little tired.
I imagine there wasn't much sleeping that night.
There was not a lot. I think we caught a nap, but it was a very memorable and just great way to end it all. Well, end it all for now. We'll see.
Finish that walk.
Finish that walk.
Yeah. So tell me about the lunch. What was it like?
It was a four-course meal. There was um, let's see, there was I don't partake in wine, but my fellow pilgrims definitely took full enjoyment of the wine. There was a sopa gallego. There was a paella. There were a couple other dishes. A couple of our company were vegetarian, and so they had a couple different options that we all tried out. It was in this really immaculate restaurant too. Just so next to the cathedral in Santiago is the Parador, and in that bottom level is where the restaurant is located. And I felt like I was a very long way away from the Meseta in that time.
Yeah.
But a very
Yeah.
just beautiful time. And yeah, we all swapped stories with the other pilgrims at the lunch. And yeah, it was a great way to cap it off.
Oh my gosh. So I'm curious why you didn't walk a normal day into Santiago and then the next morning after you've spent the night in Santiago, get up early and get in line to get that. Did you need to leave?
No, not necessarily. I could have. And I heard of people doing that. For me, I wanted there to be this sort of continuity. It
Okay.
felt like maybe in retrospect it was a little bit silly. But for me, I
That's not my word. It's actually, I think it's really beautiful, but I don't want to assess it, I think is the way I want to approach it. I don't want to assess it because it was a poignant experience for you, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think silly and poignant can coexist. Yeah, I really just enjoyed having it be just I don't know. There was something about just having it be the final event to, yeah, walking that just made sense.
I love it. I think this is an amazing story, and it's just an incredible way. The thing that I love about it is that you made a conscious decision. You know what? This is the experience we want, and this is how we can have it. Let's do something a little out of the norm, and let's go get this thing.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I'd expected to be a little bit closer to Santiago.
Right.
I knew there were other communities, but the way it all kind of lined up and the way the people I was traveling with and I determined where we wanted to stop on various days, it all just kind of lined up and it unfolded as it did. So,
It's great. The question that comes to mind is what is it like for you with your vision to walk it in the dark at nighttime?
yeah, so I would joke that I probably walked about an 8% longer Camino Francés than most pilgrims. Mostly because I like to get up pretty early, catch the sunrise, and so that hour or so before dawn, it was a challenge. I used the GPS, so I used both Camino Ninja and Wise Pilgrim.
Okay.
Both apps were they had maps that were accurate, and I found that in the mornings before dawn, I would just typically be a little bit more engaged with my phone in case I'd taken a wrong turn, which in fact I did or missed a turn off a number of times. But I kind of just came to accept those little turnabouts would be just another part of my experience.
Okay. Wow. Well, I so appreciate you coming back on the podcast and sharing your story. It's just endearing, to bear witness to this journey for you and to see what you did. I mean, I could not have foreseen that you would add in this extra big long pilgrimage and have it be so significant and so memorable. So hats off to you. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you, and thank you so much for getting me started. I mean, listening to your podcast or listening to this podcast in those months prior to embarking on the journey really kind of got me prepared and I guess built up the momentum, I guess, to make it what it was.
Yeah. Fantastic. Any final story you'd like to share?
There's the phrase or the idea of Camino magic.
Yeah.
I had a couple just really rare, just singular connections with other people along the way that I just couldn't have prepared for. And so I guess there's a lot of detail that would go into them, but I guess I would just want to impart that I could have listened and read and done all of the study. I could have spent all the time in the world getting ready to go, but it would not have prepared me for those singular experiences and what they now mean to me.
Ah, so well put. Yeah. The way that I describe it is awe and wonder. And that is found only in the moment, right where you are. It's not, you can't read about someone else's awe and wonder experience and have that be real for you, in my experience. But when you're standing in the middle of the meseta and the sun is just coming up and the air is cool and it's going to be blazing hot later, but you're ready, you're strong, and you're walking towards a destination. There's crunch of your boots on the ground. There's nothing like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Richard, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate hearing your story and getting to know how this went. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll wrap it up there. And next time you're out on the Camino, I hope you'll reach out and we'll get another story.
I will.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.